I have not been here to speak for 34, 35 years. That's when there were 250 people came to my talk on King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And that book, by the way, which is about helping men to access the mature masculine, the archetypes of the mature masculine. I don't know about you, but I'm still looking for that. Personally, but in all kinds of ways. The book is resurging, actually, in this era of, might I say, without a political slant, this era of descending darkness, which makes, for me, shining light as far as we can, always important, but even more crucial, perhaps now. I didn't think I would live to see this. I don't know if you did or not, the world go up in flames again. But here we are. Make the best of it. And my consolation, and I'll stop that part of it, my consolation in all of this is when I look at history, the broad outlines, more than the outlines, the details of history, this isn't the first time that civilization has been threatened. I recently taught a course on the decay and collapse of the Roman Republic. Not the empire, but the Republic. And the Republic took about 200 years to collapse. It doesn't take that long, necessarily, especially in an age of internet and so forth, so on. Anyway, I'm here to talk tonight about my most recent book, Soul Making, The Realization of the Mystical Life. Not my title for the book. It was the publisher's title, and I had a different title, and the reason is I never viewed myself, my life, I'm 76 plus now, as soul making. I didn't see it that way, and I didn't understand it as the realization of the mystical life. But actually, the title is right. I have always identified as a mystic, mostly of the Western traditions, but certainly not New Age. I didn't think of myself as, but I guess I am. And so this realization of the mystical life means not just doing it, but realizing that you're doing it. So anyway, I accept that I have been soul making, as I'm sure you have too, consciously, semi-consciously, maybe unconsciously, but I don't think unconsciously because you're here. At any rate, people have, I'll tell you a little bit about the book in a moment. People have asked me, do you have a meditative practice? How do you get into these altered states of consciousness? And I guess you could call it interdimensional travel and so forth. I said, no, I don't. For me, meditation is more work, and I have enough work. But I realized that it works for many people. It just, again, it's one of those things that's just sort of crept up on me without my really realizing what I was engaged in and what I was doing with my life. Of course, I've lived the usual daily life thing and had many wonderful experiences on that level of reality. Not least of which is my wife, who's in the back row with our granddaughter, who really wanted to come and learn the Theosophical way. But I lived my life backwards, really, and I realized that. I lived, a lot of retired people who are my students. I still teach, not in the emeritus program anymore at Oakton, but I teach online, my own book discussion group. They're mostly your age and older, and consequently they're dwindling in numbers gradually, of course. And one of these days, one of those numbers will be me. But the thing is, they are often traveling. I don't know how you travel at 76, 80, 85, 90 years old, but they do. And I did it the other way. I did the first half of my life exploring, traveling, mostly Latin America, but also the Near East and Europe and so forth. And then I finally got serious about my life and settled down and got the most wonderful woman in the world for me. So anyway, soul making, I guess, is about soul making, but it is an exploration of many, many, many fields of learning. I mean, primatology and biology and cosmology, quantum physics, comparative religions, Egyptology, just a host of things. I've had the good fortune, again, I didn't consciously set out to do this, but of being able to explore a lot of fields of learning. And all of that, not all of it, much of it is in here. The most striking, I think, at least comments that I've gotten about the book, have to do with its intimacy, its intimate account of many of my life experiences, which range from the normal to the psi, or parapsychological, or whatever term you want to use, to the expansive states of consciousness, of the sense of being lifted and lofted and expanding and maybe becoming one. Although here's the catch in that for me. I have felt that oneness, but I felt it. You know what I mean? You're still there. If you were completely obliterated by the infinite, you couldn't talk about it. And you couldn't remember it because you weren't there. But I was there. The parapsychological, for me, I don't like that term really, but anyway, is in my own, and that's another thing. I base absolutely all of my speculation in the book on actual experiences that I have had. I'm not borrowing, well, I do borrow some from scientists and theologians and so forth, but only where it reverberates with my own experience. So I don't say anything or tell any stories that aren't, and I don't ruminate about anything that isn't part of my lived experience. So there's theory in here, some philosophy, some theology. There's a lot of history of religions and comparative religions and so forth. But it's mostly stories about some of my experiences. All of my passions for learning, for experiencing, climbing, for example, the largely unexcavated pyramids in the Yucatan, Coba. Did anybody had a pyramid experience? I mean, not the Egyptian ones, but anyway. The jungle, the heat, it's just fantastic. I've traveled a lot, I've seen a lot, but I've experienced a lot, as we all have, of darkness and light and everything in between. But the highest and most exhilarating and most meaningful experience that, in the book too, ties all of my life together is the experience of love. And I mean love for people, for knowledge, for the divine, for nature, for how do I say it? It is the most fulfilling of all human needs experience that I at least have had. I believe, based on my own experiences, which are limited, that everything is person. That's where I'm going with the love thing and all the experiences and so forth. I believe that persons are all the way up and all the way down. And by persons, I don't mean just us. I mean everything has some element of person to it, personhood to it, I think. And it does because it is being manifested by the infinite person, who can only, or chooses only, to manifest himself, herself, itself, which is person. The ancient Egyptians, as you probably know, in their New Kingdom hymns, frequently adulate, exuberate, celebrate whatever god they have in mind, Amun, or later in the later period, Isis, and so forth, by saying in the hymns, "Thou hast made thyself into millions, into these millions." Thyself. That means anything that we are or anything else. To me, that means anything that we are or anything that is in this plane of reality, and I believe in others as well, is an expression of and is consubstantial with and is the infinite person. There is the problem, of course, that for the divine to mean anything significant, at least to me, it has to be absolute goodness and love. So there's the perennial question, not answered to my satisfaction, which I also discuss at some length, and I try different avenues of approaching it. The problem of evil, and I will call it that. Distortion, fragmentation, maliciousness, malignant egotism. And so how does that come? How does that manifest from absolute goodness? Well, there are lots of attempted explanations. I feel the truth in some of them, but really in virtually all of them, but not quite hitting the nail on the head for me. So there's this disjunction in my mind between an absolute goodness and oneness from which we and all things began and what we are living, between the infinite and the finite, between the light and the darkness, and so forth. And I struggle with that. I'm not willing to say, okay, well, it's just the way it is, which is a non-answer. And I'm not willing to say, well, okay, ultimately it all may be good. But in our experience, my experience, right here, right now, it isn't that. And it's not so much for me that I feel the pain, it's for others, and especially others that I love. But really, others. And I include animals, plants, fungi. It's hard to love a virus, but, you know. Nonetheless, I do think that persons at whatever level, and I'll give you a range of levels that I think persons exist at. I do think persons are striving, consciously, semi-consciously, or unconsciously, most probably what we would call unconsciously, for absolute validation. And they think they can get that, and maybe not thinking, but they seem to express themselves as if they were thinking that can be here and now. That the bacterium can spread and grow forever and ever and ever and reach no limits. That cyanobacteria in the early Earth, which froze the planet 4 or 5 times until animals were invented. Life is so greedy, it does not know when to stop. And so it ends up being suicidal, I think. It must be stopped by other agencies. So there's this struggle, there's this yearning to return to the infinite. That's what I'm talking about really here. Misunderstood, misappropriated, and so forth. And it's not just us, in other words. It is us. I mean, how many $1 billion do you have to have before you realize, I mean, this is not immortality. This is not ever going to be full. But I'm talking about cyanobacteria. Okay, persons. You know, Alfred North Whitehead, you know him, the British, yeah. He believed that every change of state at the most micro level that can be imagined, below the Planck era and the Planck measurement, every change of state, whatever is changing its state, in some way feels it. David Chalmers talks about the thermostat. Thermostat has 3 states, right? On, off, dormant. And he says, well, you know, I don't know, but I think something is happening. Something is being registered there that makes the thermostat person-ish. Protons and neutrons are made of quarks. We don't know how many yet. We're still finding more. But the primary are 2 up and 1 down, or 2 down and 1 up. The point is the quarks exert a tremendous willfulness, what we would call willfulness. They are struggling with all their might to get out to break the proton. The proton wouldn't have its protonness without the quarks. So the strong nuclear force pulls the quarks back in. So what is going on there? Okay, you can say it's blind forces and so forth, but it seems person-ish to me, or at least the prelude to the development of personhood. There's some kind of, I'm not saying it's a conscious awareness, but there's something that is built in, inherent in this universe, and maybe all other dimensions, that has an I-ness, capital I, a kind of I-ness. I, other, me, not me. And there's a struggle between the me and the not me. You don't have to raise your hands, but I'm wondering if you have felt what I have felt sometimes, which is like me and sometimes not like me. We say, I don't know what came over me today. You know, I didn't feel like myself today. Well, if you didn't feel like yourself, who did you feel like? So I think this is at all levels. And I do think the universe, I'll say this reality, is layered. That's my experience. It's my psychological experience of the layers within me. I say within, I don't know where they are really. But it does seem to me that things are layered. That shows up not only in our personalities and our daily lives, but think of dream analysis, dream interpretation. Every character in the dream, according to Jung, is you. Disguised, you know, but you. And maybe you, certainly you, in some dreams anyway, that you couldn't possibly recognize as you. Or integrate into your dominant identity. That's layering. I connect, tentatively, I connect dreams with OBEs and NDEs. I think we are visited, out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences. I think we are visions and other things which I'll talk about in a minute. But I think we do experience, though we may not realize it, that we do live and function on different levels, most of which are unconscious to us. Jung talked about it as that level stuff, as the collective unconscious. I think of it more as the collective consciousness, because as depth psychologies have shown, that stuff, and there's a whole lot of it in there, of layers, and their inhabitants are conscious of us. We may not be conscious, in fact, usually aren't conscious of them. You probably believe this too, I don't know. But that all around us, all within us, inner, outer, which is a kind of a shorthand way of distinguishing ourselves as finite entities from other apparently finite entities. But there are worlds right here, right now, everywhere. Not far, far off in a distant galaxy, you know, right here. That if we just looked to the side, if we could catch a glimpse, we would see them, experience them. Most of them, in my experience, are pretty, I would say, morally, ethically neutral, or about like us. And they are inhabited. We are not alone. And we, you know, the edges of these worlds or dimensions are leaky or porous. So while I haven't set out to explore them, they have explored me. Unbidden, unwished for, unwanted, but there they are. A couple, I have lots of examples. You probably do too from your own lives. But, I mean, have you ever felt strongly in a room by yourself that there was a presence there? Maybe yes, maybe no. Yeah. I don't think it's imaginary. I think it's imaginal. A difference that one of my great heroes of spirituality makes, Ibn al-Arabi, medieval Sufi, between the imaginal and the imaginary. Imaginary has more to do with fantasy, if there is such a thing, really. Imaginal, more the exploration of different levels of being. and consciousness. I'd like to give you a couple of stories about the paranormal that I've experienced. There are many more. I, many years ago, drove up to, where was that? What's the capital of Michigan? Lansing. With my brother's now ex-mother-in-law to go up to her mother's place to get some furniture for my brother and his wife who were living in North Carolina. So we go to her mother's house, apartment, and we slept over. My brother's ex-mother-in-law and her mother slept in the same bedroom, and I was left to sleep on the sofa. About 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up, and I had the strongest sense that there was a presence in the room. And it wasn't just a presence. I knew where it was in the room. And I knew it was a little old man. I tried and tried to see. I couldn't. It's called an incipient apparition.
What's that word, incipient?
Incipient, meaning
With an A?
With an I, incipient. Manifesting, but not strongly enough for me anyway. And I knew he was angry at me. And I had this sense he was angry for me for sleeping on the sofa. And I thought, oh, that's weird. And after a while, I just went back to sleep. But it was a strong enough thing that I asked Louise, shortened version of my brother's ex-mother-in-law, I asked Louise at breakfast in the house, I told her about it. And she said, oh, that's interesting because my father was here last night. He came into the bedroom, and I woke up in bed, and there he was standing in the corner in a shaft of light, very common thing. And she just said, hi, Dad. And he smiled and disappeared. Okay, she said, do you want to know how he died? I said, okay. She said they were in the basement doing the laundry and were coming up the stairs, and she heard him stumbling on the stairs up to the apartment, and he was having a heart attack, and he died in her arms on the sofa, of course. And she had been sleeping on the sofa every night since he died, like 3 or 4 months before, because that's where she felt him the strongest. That was the first night she hadn't slept on the sofa. So I'm thinking, okay, here he comes to be close to his wife, and he finds a young man, and it's like, what? And you can imagine all kinds of things that he's thinking. So that's one story. And what do I make of it? He came from somewhere. I don't know where he lives now, but he's still connected, or he was then. And feeling love, joy, anger, jealousy, whatever. Here's another one that's a little bit longer. This happened just about 2 years ago. I was the nanny for my granddaughter for 10 months. Yeah, from 3 months to 13. And we just had, still do, but I mean, it was babyhood to her first steps, kind of thing, and a deep, deep bond. Anyway, her parents, my daughter and her almost ex-husband, a couple summers ago, we were all hanging out in the yard, and he said, Zach, I'll say his name, Zach said, I don't understand. Kennedy, that's her name, looks Oriental. I said, not Oriental, Plains Indian. And so I said, get on your phones and look up late 19th century, early 20th century pictures of Plains Indians. And they did, and they said, wow, that is it. Okay, my wife is Mexican, so our daughter's half Mexican. Zach, who is going off to the outback somewhere, hopefully, is also half Mexican. So you would think Kennedy would look half Mexican. She doesn't. She looks Plains Indian. There's a difference. I mean, there's overlap, but. So I told them the story of my great-great-grandmother who lived in northwest Iowa. She was Native American, braids, the whole thing. She married one of my Metcalf ancestors who was a horse trader, which I think, frankly, is a euphemism for horse thief. Because the Native Americans and the white people in northwest Iowa hated each other's guts. Part of the reason was land, of course, and hunting grounds, but the other part was mutual horse theft. Think of automobile theft today. You know, we have buses and so on. They just had horses. So anyhow, but they got together, they fell in love, they got together, and they moved to Sioux City, Iowa to escape the bad stuff in northwest Iowa. Okay, so my mother used to tell me a story that she herself sometimes called herself, what did she say, a dangerous Indian. Okay, and I have to agree, she was dangerous at times. And she told me the family legend about this flight to Sioux City, Iowa. By the way, they were co-founders of Sioux City, Iowa, and it's called Sioux City because a branch of the Sioux, the Sisseton Sioux, and the white people moving in actually got along, and there was a lot of intermarriage, which is in my family. So okay, that's the first part of the story. Here's where it gets odd. I was taking care of Kennedy, and my first Zoom class was coming up to teach. And of course, that was going to be a disaster with Kennedy trying to sleep at 3.5 months and my trying to teach. So my wife, Olga, stayed home and sat on the sofa in the office where I was doing the Zoom meeting with Kennedy. We were studying, what's the title of the book? Changed in a Flash by Jeffrey Kripal and someone else. But anyway, and where he talks about how often apparitions seem to be using the electromagnetic spectrum somehow in ways that we can't to make their appearance. And that's why there's a kind of electricity around them, sometimes generate light, and so on and so on. And because Kennedy was there, I was telling them the story of her ancestry, her heritage. I had just finished that section when, on the Zoom screen, you know, all the little squares, people have their names on there. In the middle of the screen, there is this Native American woman in 19th century dress, graying braids. She's not like the other students, she's not looking at the camera. She's got her head like 3/4 turned away, hooded eyes, very black pupils and irises. And she posted her name, Cenoda. I thought it was Cenoda, which it could be. That's another story. But she posted her name. she didn't look like the kind of person that I could say, hi, Cenoda, welcome to the class. So I just looked at her and I said, Cenoda. She nodded and she smiled a little bit. The thing is, I could see some other things in her face that were kind of behind her, as if she were manifesting multiply. And I just went on. I mean, I've learned to take this kind of stuff it's just part of reality. And when I looked, and so I went on teaching, when I looked back, she was gone. So I thought, well, okay. Finally, a student asked, he said, did we just see an apparition? And I said, he said, did anybody else see a Native American woman? And 5 hands go up. And he said, did we just see an apparition? I said, I don't know what we saw, but we did see it. And she was showing herself to us, or to some of us. And anyway, I wanted to eliminate the naturalistic possibilities, so I called, I was teaching Oakton College, emeritus at that time. I called the IT department. I said, is there any way that anybody could have crashed my class? No, not unless one of your students gave them the code. Okay, I asked the class, did anybody invite a friend, even though they'd been dead for 80 years? No, we didn't share the code. And okay, so then I asked my boss, who I thought was going to be, you must be out of your mind, this is the last class you're teaching. Instead of that, she went along. She was open to, I said, okay, what are the chances that an old Native American woman on a reservation or in an urban center, wherever, could get into my class? None. What are the chances that somebody like that could hire a hacker to get into my class? None. Have you ever seen anybody that looked like that on the Oakton campus registering for no. So she said, yeah, I think, Doug, that was, okay, there's more to the story. Then I'll move on to something else. But I thought, okay, maybe, okay, so 2 understandings of Cenoda or Cenoda online. Cenoda is supposedly a malevolent spirit who can take on many forms and causes trouble. I thought, oh, okay, but she didn't look malevolent. She looked more like a mischievous or secretive, kind of shy, maybe, fairy godmother type. That's what I thought. That was my first impression. But the other, so that's Cenoda. But I thought, well, maybe it really was my great-great-grandmother. Then her name would be pronounced Cenoda in Sisseton Sioux. So then I'm looking for more information on Northwest Iowa and the chiefs and so on up there. I did not, there was a list of chiefs for that place and that time. And I did not click any of those guys, but one of them showed up in red without touching it. And his name was Sidominadota. Okay, Cenoda sounds like a contraction of Sidominadota, which means many violent cuttings of the toes. So I went to the Iowa Historical Society, looked into it further, and it turns out Sidominadota was in the horse thieving thing with the whites. They killed him and massacred his family, except one 10-year-old girl got away. That would have been the perfect age. I haven't carried it further, but I plan to see if they have information, if they have a name for that girl that got away. But anyway, so again, you don't have to raise your hands, but has anybody, that's what is a fully manifest apparition. Anybody want to confess to that? No. Okay. Yeah. They happen. Yeah. Without wishing, wanting, expecting anything. So that for me is the parapsychological level. Stuff like that happens, and all kinds of other stuff. Then that seems rather distinct to me from what I would call a spiritual level, or spiritual levels. Parapsychological is either kind of dark, or it's odd, or it's quirky, or it's like, oh, okay, oh, hi. The spiritual, for me, is different. It's lifting, it's exalting. You know when you start wafting up or whatever, expanding into something that is expansive, probably infinite, and so forth. And it feels very different. Fulfilling, filled with light and promise and joy, awe and terror to some extent, but wonder and delight and love. And so these are just two examples of many of my experiencing of levels. That is heavily influenced in the book. So I do want to talk about a couple. I'd like to talk about the whole book, but can't. I do want to note a couple of things. There is this perennial problem, not just how you get evil from absolute goodness, but how you get multiplicity from oneness. How does that happen? I mean, if the one is one, absolutely, and infinitely, well, there is nothing outside of infinity or other than infinity. So that's a problem that has bedeviled philosophers, theosophists, theologians, and has only one answer so far as I know. And that's the answer that my hero, Ibn Arabi, gave. And he said, after hundreds and hundreds of pages of trying to unravel this mystery, he said, okay, look, the one is the many are the one. There's nothing more to say about it. Period. And I accept that. It's this struggle goes back to the ancient Egyptians again, as I mentioned. Thou hast made thyself into these millions. Benoit Mandelbrot, have you heard of him? Yeah. I don't understand about 98% of what he writes, but I do get this part. The theory that, or the hypothesis that it's all infinity. His theory of coasts, that every surface can be tracked down beyond the Planck measurement and so forth, infinitely. It's all infinity. Like he uses the coastline of Britain. He says if you go down to the granular level as you're mapping the coastline, keep going, go down to the molecular, go down to the atomic, go down to the subatomic, and it just keeps repeating. And as far as anybody can tell, it goes on forever, which would suggest that everything is infinite, everything, and it's just crafted or or broken out to like George Cantor's infinities, some bigger than others. Well, ultimately they're not, but for practical purposes, you can measure them as larger or smaller. But anyway, so that's one way of doing it, but it doesn't actually explain how you get from the one to the many. You can see that it might work, but not for humans, not for human mentality. We can see that it happens. We cannot see how it happens, if it does happen. Okay, so that's a note about space. You know the relatively new discoveries of non-locality, which Einstein hated and was defeated by over and over and over again, finally, that beneath the level of quantum objects, as they normally behave, one here, one there, they can signal each other and so forth. There's a level below that at which they're not signaling each other because the fastest signal is the speed of light. Non-locality is the discovery that there is a dimension beneath or above the speed of light that takes no time, no space. It's instantaneous. When an electron jumps its orbit, it doesn't move from here to there. It doesn't take nanosecond. It's like that. It's instantaneous. Particles can communicate over thousands, even theoretically millions of miles. They don't communicate. They're operating in complete sync instantaneously with each other. So much for time and space, ultimately. One thing I want to stress in all of this and more is that I don't know what reality is. I don't know anyone who does. What it is, I do suppose, I think in everything that I've said so far and other things, that we can perceive bits of it, like we're in a little thin wafer of it. And we get clues about stuff up, down, beside us, etc. But we do not, I think we live in a psychic medium. Psyche with a capital P. The infinite person. As the Greek poet said, first is Zeus, first is God, in whom we live and move and have our being. There's nowhere outside of that. There is no outside of that. And that, if one puts together the discoveries of cosmology and quantum physics and research in the parapsychological and all that sort of thing, I think in depth psychology and on and on and on, and visions and so forth, it becomes not any more incredible at all that everything is not only linked at this level and other levels probably of reality, but it is all finally one. We are each other. We are each other. Not in ways that we can fully experience. That's obvious, right? But except in moments or flashes of insight. Non-locality, the one and the many, good and evil, spirit, the dimensions thing. If you have experienced an incipient apparition, could be a voice, could be a scent, could be a puff of wind in a closed space on your hair, or whatever, could be fully manifest, as Cenoda was, and some other awful character that I won't describe tonight that I experienced, means to me that these dimensions are inhabited. I mean, if you ask the question, where is Cenoda when she's not appearing in a Zoom class? Where is she? Well, from the looks of her, what I saw, she's in some kind of medium not unlike this one, which isn't what it appears to be anyway, as we all know. So it's like, well, they're coming from somewhere. They inhabit somewhere. And if you've experienced dead loved ones or you know, things like that, or people that you love that have passed on and they show up in dreams, as Jung said, all the figures in a dream are us, but there are layers and levels to dreams. And it may be that when my wife saw her dead father in a dream, on the other side of a glass-like sheet, looking about 40 years old and very happy, and waved and in his Mexican cowboy outfit and so forth, that there's a kind of antechamber, or there are places where in the mind, in the soul, where things open. And anyway, I don't know what all is over there, but or over there in those different places, of course, but there are folks there. I'm convinced of that. Persons. I do want to say a word about that. Are you getting tired yet, or are you okay? Are you okay? Okay. Persons. I ask my classes sometimes things like, where is your mind in my head? Where's your head? Part of my body. Where's your body? In the universe. Where's the universe? In my mind. There is no other place for it to be. There is no way of getting outside of the psyche. This is a hard one, I know, to get. Not for you guys, because you're Theosophists and so forth, but it's very hard for people that don't think this way or don't see this. There is nothing outside of consciousness. At whatever level you want to make it. You know, we're all sleepwalking, and some of us get more conscious, more conscious, more conscious. Some of us don't. But there isn't anything beyond. I'm not saying there is no world out there, that you're not there. I'm shorthand, pragmatically, you're there, I'm here. But push it, and I don't know if you're anything but what I'm imagining. Another way, the famous George Berkeley thing about if a tree falls in a forest and there's nobody there to hear it, does it actually fall? Is there a forest? And everybody says, of course, yes, there's a forest. Nobody there to hear it, but you can set up tape recorders, or at least you can record the percussive waves of sound. Yeah, and I say, yes, but you're still there imagining that. And then they say, oh no, okay, so take all that away. I say, you're still there. Who's imagining the forest but you? I mean, for you. How do you, so the answer is, without a subject, there is no object. It's counterintuitive. We think of it the other way around. Subjects come to be because there are objects. That's the scientific view, which I accept, that's fine at that level of thought. But the truth is, here's another one. No one thinking nothing. Pure consciousness, right? No such thing. There's always someone thinking, no one thinking nothing. It may be pure consciousness, but it's you that is experiencing pure consciousness. This is the Islamic thing of fana and baka. Fana is the occultation of the consciousness in mystical experience. Consciousness is not gone. It's there on the sidelines watching. Otherwise, it couldn't experience baka, or restoration, and talk about it. You know how much has been written and talked about nothingness? If it was really nothingness, there wouldn't be a peep. So you're there, and there's no way to get out of being there. And that's a very unpopular position called solipsism. But I think whatever the practical consequences, solipsism cannot be defeated. Are you going somewhere, honey? Okay.
What's that word you use?
Solipsism.
I spell that, please.
S-O-L-I-P, solip. I think it's S-I-S-M. It's hard to visualize.
So what does that word mean again?
It means that all there is, well, it means several things, but fundamentally, all there is you. There's no way to get outside of you. Or there's no way for you to not be there wherever there is a there. Okay, well, there's a lot more. But I ruminate on these things and give experiences in the book. Experiences that I hope will resonate with you. And we can be fellow journeyers.